Well, good afternoon and welcome to Round the Table Live with Chris Concern. And we are asking the question today, is it ever in the best interests of someone to die? And should the courts be able to determine that it is in your best interests or someone else's best interests to die rather than to receive further treatment? And we've had two very high-profile cases around this in the recent weeks, Indi Gregory and Sudiksha as well. And joined today by Andrea Williams, Chief Executive of Chris Concern, and also Michael Phillips, barrister and lawyer who works on a number of our legal cases as well. Thank you very much for joining us, folks. Good to see you. So, Andrea, I want to come to you first. And just last week, 8-month-old Indi Gregory sadly died after her life support was removed against the wishes of her parents. And UK courts decided it was in her best interest to die, even though specialists in Italy who had looked at her medical notes had decided to offer treatment. And she was offered to go to have specialist treatment in Italy at no cost to the NHS. And the Italian government even gave her Italian citizenship and requested her to be extradited over to Italy. And the Italian Prime Minister made statements about it. Italian politicians made statements about it. And here in the UK, I haven't seen any politicians say something, and the court said no. Explain to us what happened in this case, Andrea.
Well, I think you've done a pretty good overview there, Tim, and it's extraordinarily perplexing, isn't it? That our system, that our NHS, our hospitals, our judges, Court of Appeal judges, first of all, Mr. Justice Robert Peel in the High Court, and then Lady Justice Eleanor King, Lord Justice Andrew Moylan, Lord Justice Peter Jackson, would all keep on upholding the decision to withdraw life support treatment from baby Indi, as in her best interest. It was in her best interest, they said, to die, not to prolong her suffering, that she should have a good death. And this was despite the fact that alternate medical care had been found, a treatment plan had been found in Italy, transportation had been found, baby Indi could have gone. And so we have a situation here whereby, and I think this is a very important point that sometimes gets missed, nobody was asking any medic to treat against their will or against their best judgment. But what is very important.
Yep.
But the truth is here that what medics might disagree on the best course of action. But the reality was that in this case, Indi's parents, beautiful parents, Dean and Claire, they had found alternate treatment in Italy, medics prepared to do a heart operation and believing that Indi's quality of life would be improved. Again, it's often said the parents are not facing up to the reality of the situation. She's got a bad mitochondrial disease. The Christian Legal Centre is not facing up to the reality of the situation. We know the reality of the situation. We know that baby Indi is very sick. What we're saying in this particular situation is that to withdraw treatment means certain death. To continue treatment means that Indi has a chance of living for longer. We all have a chance of knowing her. We all have a chance of discovering the improvements that can be made in living with these kind of conditions. This was all possible in the case of baby Indi, and indeed she would be alive today had she been allowed to be transferred, we believe, to be transferred to Italy. So that was the position that we found ourselves in. To say that it's in the best interest of someone to die and that it's against her best interests to travel to Italy because she might suffer, that's again this crazy paradoxical logic. It's in her best interest to die because she might suffer if she travels to Italy, when the parents, perfectly good parents, are saying, we want to take this risk. We want her to travel. We want her to go to Italy.
So it's really quite shocking, isn't it, to see what happened there. Michael, can I ask you, how is it that the courts have got to this position where they can decide it's in someone's best interests to die?
It really started with a case which started back in the 1990s. And if anybody is familiar with what was happening back then, it was a House of Lords decision in the case of Bland, Anthony Bland. And so if we remember back then, there was the Hillsborough disaster, and he sadly was in a persistent vegetative state. He was completely dependent on life-sustaining treatment. The doctors and the family wanted to withdraw the treatment and let him die. And these days, I mean, it would really have been a done deal. However, the official solicitor in that case was represented by Sir James Mumby of Queen's Counsel, as he then was. He was a barrister at that stage, but then he went on and he became the president of the family division. He argued a case, and he argued it all the way up to the House of Lords. And the House of Lords at that stage was the Supreme Court for the entire United Kingdom. And he said that this would really be murder under the common law if we allow this to happen. However, the House of Lords, as in the Judicial Committee, the House of Lords said, no, that isn't the case. It's not going to be murder if it is done in the patient's best interest. And to be sure of that, that's how the courts came up with the best interest test. And that became the leading authority. So that is the law that we now act under. And so long ago, the local authority would be routinely, they wouldn't use that. But now that is the position of the local authority, every time that they go to court, this is the case that they rely upon. And it's all about what purportedly is in the best interest of the child or the patient.
But Michael, how do they decide what is, how can it be in someone's best interest to die when they're being offered alternative treatment?
Well, that would seem to be a question that really answers itself. But very often the argument is that in these particular circumstances, because of the suffering that the person is undergoing, it is so tremendous that it would be better if their life ended now rather than it continuing. And very often it's very difficult in a situation where the parents aren't doctors, they're not nurses, they're just ordinary people. And they say, look, this person is suffering because they're crying. Well, they're a baby. Or, they're coughing. Well, yes, they would do because they've got a tube in their mouth. And so it's the problem.
Can I say on this one as well, Michael? I just on this one, because I think the thing about this baby Indy that's very poignant is that Dean and Claire, the parents, were offered abortion, not once, but many times before she was born because of her condition. So this was the first time that Indy wasn't meant to be born. This is
a mentality that it's better for some people not to live.
Not to die because she was going to be. Then they were told to prepare themselves that she was going to be born blue, that she wouldn't live for very long. She was born beautiful. She was born a beautiful color, all pink and with these long eyelashes. And if you've seen the photographs of Indy, she's just so beautiful with big eyes. And they said she's not going to last. She's going to die. But she didn't die. And all the time, this is the point of Dean. It said it was like she was an angel all the time. She defied all the odds. And this is why, and these parents who loved for her and fought for her, we've been accused and we are being accused of giving unrealistic hope to the parents. How precious were those 8 months? How precious. What kind of, you see in Dean, he said it's like she was an angel, and it's as if she's made me understand how precious life is. She's the most precious thing. And that's so beautiful, to the idea that she would have even been denied her first breath on this earth because the best advice was she's going to have no quality of life, when in fact the joy that she brought to her parents and siblings was so amazing and deep and rich. This is life. This is life. Mm-hmm. And it's, and when the system says it's in the best interest for someone not to be born, it's in their best interest to die. When there is still hope and there is still life. I'm reminded, Michael, when you were talking of, you remember one of our cases of Nikki and Merv Kenwood, like Tony Bland. Mm-hmm. Nikki, she had Guillain-Barré syndrome and she was locked in. And she couldn't communicate, and she was hearing everyone, the doctors and nurses, talking about her as if she, knew nothing when she knew everything. And she was trying desperately to communicate, I want to live and I'm here. And she was really scared. And she tells this story very powerfully. And perhaps those behind the scenes can link to her case. But
I think the real danger is in all of these cases is that it's really euthanasia by the back door. And so that's what the real fear is that there's been many attempts over the years in order to bring in euthanasia, and it isn't. Thank God it is not part of our law in this country, and everywhere where it is brought in, what happens is that you have the floodgates open, and people that are perfectly mentally competent but maybe depressed or maybe have got Down syndrome or maybe they've got autism are being regularly offered euthanasia. And this is a situation whereby who is the best person to make a decision in order to decide whether somebody should live? That person is, and if they're not old enough, it's their parents. And unless their parents are really saying something quite crazy, then, and it's, two options, we're not too sure which one is going to work, then why don't we trust parents to do the right thing? And that's really what these cases are all about.
Yeah, and it sets an alarming precedence, doesn't it? That it seems to me that doctors can decide it's in your best interest to die, even when there is alternative treatment, and you want it, and your parents want it in this case, or those who speak for you want it. But the courts say no. Well, it's still in your best interest to die, and then they go and end up removing the life support, and they weren't even allowed to take her home to remove the life support, were they, Andrea?
No, and I think as well the other thing is that it's. These cases have got a lot more public attention in the last 5 years or so. But the truth is that this whole situation, these situations are dealt with behind closed doors generally. This has been the history of these cases in a court of protection or in the family court. They're being dealt with behind closed doors, with very little media access. Doctors, hospitals are not named, and so there has been a general lack of transparency when these sorts of life and death decisions need to be properly tested, particularly when parents or individuals want their names to be known, for instance. So and there's a relatively small pool of judges with a relatively small pool of lawyers that deal with these cases. And, as a result of our involvement, there is not inconsiderable. There's quite considerable pushback on us, on the organisation, on the lawyers involved, simply for breaking open a system that has been pretty closed. So,
I think the thing is that it's often pitted in some parts of the media as these. Slightly vulnerable parents being preyed upon by these people who are ideologically motivated to go in a particular way, but nothing further. Nothing could be further from the truth. The truth of the matter is that these parents just want to know that their case is being heard. They just want somebody on their side, and it's not just that they want a lawyer on their side. They want somebody who's not just a lawyer, but also people who are prepared to fight and believe them. That even if it is right to say that sadly, they go to Italy or they go home and they die shortly thereafter. They've tried fighting. And because occasionally people do break through. And yes, it may well be the case that doctors, generally speaking, do get it right, but that's fine. Occasionally they get it wrong. Just like lawyers, we get it wrong sometimes. We make mistakes. So when it's life and death, nobody should be prepared to be not challenged. We have to have the freedom to be able to challenge what the doctors are saying and what the courts are saying. Because that's how a free and a fair society works.
Yes, and I think the other thing is, one of the other disturbing features of these cases, Tim, has been that the baby is often represented by what's called a guardian in the court. And they always side with the hospital. And so, and the other thing is, these parents, we haven't found the parents find us. And sometimes they've spent their life savings on other lawyers, but they find us. And just imagine this: you have a situation whereby doctors are telling you they're going to withdraw treatment from your child, and suddenly you find yourself in a courtroom with very big words being used, very highly educated people all around you speaking in big words, legal language. is almost an alien foreign language, and you perhaps don't, and that you're a parent. Dean said until this case, he'd never been to London. And he suddenly found himself, he's actually incredibly articulate, very eloquent, as he contends for his baby Indy. But the truth is that this Dean, this was another world for him. And so coming alongside these parents and giving them a voice, and so thank you to Michael, to Pavel, to Bruno, to the lawyers, to Louis, that gave baby Indy a voice, that gave Sudiksha a voice in this situation. To the work of Christian Legal Centre, Christian Concern supporting them. We're all about giving them a voice, but also to say it's about individual justice. But as Michael has said, this is also about holding the line really firm on beginning and end of life matters. How, and the protection of life is a fundamental concept in a civilized society.
Sure.
We begin to say that life is not of intrinsic worth, is not something that needs to be entirely protected and upheld, then we slip into something that is very dark indeed. And we've seen this in cases like Canada, where and you Tim might be able to correct me on the statistic if I get this wrong, but it's something like there are a third more assisted suicides, euthanasia, now in the last year or post-COVID. But the increase is tremendous in Canada, where it's actually become they call it a treatment option.
Yes.
To have physician-assisted suicide in Canada is now something you are offered when, as a suite of treatments. When you
there've been cases of people who've phoned up asking for a disabled ramp for their wheelchair, and they're like, "Oh well, we're not sure we do that, but we can offer you assisted suicide." I mean, it's crazy what they do, what's happening in Canada. But listen, just if you're watching live on Facebook and YouTube, thank you for commenting. We see quite a lot of your comments here. Thank you. Interesting one from Michael Petek here. I know that lots and lots of legal avenues were pursued here. But Michael Petek was saying, what are the possibilities for engaging the Italian criminal justice system to pursue those responsible for detention and murder of Indi Gregory? The point being that Indi was an Italian citizen, a full Italian citizen by the time she died. I don't know if that's a legal avenue that's been pursued or could be pursued or not. But lots of other avenues were pursued, including going to the European Court of Human Rights, various other points here. Michael, how would you change the law to stop these kind of cases happening in the future?
I think that there does have to be a comprehensive reform that goes on, because what a small change here and a small change there, I mean, it's become very much part of the culture, and the culture permeates not just the courts, not just the NHS, but also the Guardian and even the lawyers, generally speaking, who are meant to be there defending the parents. Because when you turn up to family court, as I have done in the past myself, there is very often, it is quite palsy. Everybody knows each other. It's a relatively small circle, and people generally are meant to come to a consensus. So if you are the kid in the class who puts your hand up and says, "I'm not prepared to wear that T-shirt," then in those circumstances, you are somebody who is frozen out potentially. And when you put forward your arguments, there is a bit of an oddity to it. So I mean, I think that we have to go and look at the system as a whole. So one thing that I would say is this: there must be a right to instruct experts. So in the last case that we did, Indie Gregory, there was the parents wanted to instruct their own experts. And generally speaking, in any other form of proceedings, you're facing criminal proceedings, that there has to be equality of arms. The Crown Prosecution Service, or in this case, the NHS, have their own experts. They've got as much time as they want in order to prepare their case. And then you are literally there in days. Sometimes there's going to be a full hearing next week, or maybe the week after next, if you're lucky. And you need experts. And these experts aren't just to a penny. Sometimes they're abroad, and they've got their own practices. But there should be a right to have your own expert. That's one thing I would say. And there must be enough time in order to prepare your case. You can't just be told next week we're having a full trial. Whereas, typically in a criminal case, you'll wait 6 months, maybe 2 years for your case. Whereas here, there's always such urgency, allegedly, but we're talking about life and death. So, and I think ultimately there must be very good justification for refusing parents a right to choose their own treatment, especially when there's two equal, almost nothing to distinguish between two sets of treatment, apart from the fact that one's maybe in another part of the country or in another country. And in those circumstances, there must be that equality given to the parents in order for them to choose what's best for their child.
Surely, this is the thing that's so highly perplexing when pediatric consultants in one of the best hospitals in the world are prepared to treat Indy. Why would anyone stop it? Why would a whole system stop it? This is the most perplexing thing about this case. No matter, doctors may have genuine views about how hopeless the treatment might be or how futile, but when there is a doctor willing to treat and the wherewithal to get baby Indy to a hospital at no cost to anyone in the United Kingdom, it's quite extraordinary that would be thwarted. And, baby Indy died a week ago last Monday. But for 2 or 3 weeks before, she'd been offered that transport and a place in a hospital in Rome. And not backed by the Pope and the Vatican. It was backed by the Prime Minister of Italy, Giorgia Meloni. Backed by Matteo Corradini, the Italian consul. Backed by an application in law with regard to the Hague Convention to essentially say there are two countries that are having a dispute over the treatment of this child and how we view life.
And the thing is it was big news in Italy. I know somebody who lives in Italy, and he said, "Oh, by the way, are you involved in this case?" Because it was there every day in the Italian newspapers. Because for whatever reason, Italy is not as far on as we are in this country in terms of this particular issue, and the people there really kind of saw what was happening and were horrified, and that's why obviously the Italian government got behind it.
Michael, why is that, Andrea? Why is it that the Italians are horrified? It goes right up to the Prime Minister and everything, and here in the UK, I've not seen any politicians comment on it at all.
Well, I just think it's just interesting, isn't it, that it was on every major news. I know Italy very well, as you know, I'm half Italian, and there is the major news channels, all the broadcast channels, the major newspapers really were foregrounding this story every single day in Italy. It was major news in Italy.
In the US as well, and the New York Times.
Yeah, it was, because there was a presumption of life. It's not so we know best and your best interests are to die, but rather the little girl is fighting. The daddy is fighting because he was the dad is fighting for his little girl.
They all think the NHS is crazy not allowing her to travel, and that's the thing. They all think the NHS is crazy and awful.
But it's like two completely different collective mindsets. So from the Prime Minister to the person sitting in front of the television in a flat in Italy, in Milan, let's say, the collective mindset says she should come here and be given a chance of life, compared to the collective mindset in England, which says the NHS, the judges know best, and the government is going to stay out of it. And then generally it doesn't decipher down into the living room of someone in a flat in Birmingham. And so that's kind of, there's a whole, it's like a collective
blindness.
Collective groupthink.
Groupthink, yeah.
I mean, it's a kind of form of statism, isn't it? That the belief that for many years we could trust the state, and we just had a few TV channels and more or less they told the truth, and the government usually told the truth, and so we have this belief that probably the NHS doctors are telling the truth and that they do know what's best, and why would you disbelieve them? And the thing is this, that this is what I have said to be my many clients, that before they get involved in either the criminal justice system or the family court system, they said, I had absolute faith in these systems. And then I got involved in it personally, and I didn't want to do this. I wanted to do that. And then I was told, no, you can't, you've got to do this. And then I realized there's something wrong with the system. But I think the vast majority of people who live, who only have tangential experience of the system, don't realize exactly how bad it can be in certain circumstances. And basically, you are told what to do, and if you don't do it, then you're a bit of a freak and a weirdo. But there must be that freedom to dissent by parents, who ultimately are the people who entrust the care of their child to either school or to hospital.
Can I, Tim? I know you want to move. I think Mike's also hit on a very big point there. And I think we've got to think about this, particularly those of us that are Christians, but also just in terms of identifying this kind of groupthink, which is that it's in the UK, we've kind of allowed the state to grow so big in our lives. So the state is responsible for education. The state is responsible for our pensions. The state is responsible for our health. The state is responsible for absolutely everything. When in fact, as Christians, we know that God endows us with personal responsibility. Then within our families, to take care of our children in terms of all matters, their health, their education, we need to look after them, and we need to do the very best for them. And it's as if in the face of collectively, we just think the government always knows best. We're going to fall into line with whatever it is that the state is telling us to do. And I think we need to think about that, because it's become too big. Whereas in God's model, you actually, the truth is that the family is a unit, which is a kind of, the church is a unit. These are actually their own forms of government and the state is actually not meant to be this big. We are meant to look after our children.
But let's just move on to talk about Sudiksha as well, Andrea, because Sudiksha sadly died, I think it was in September, and again was refused treatment abroad, refused to travel abroad. But more disturbingly, she was actually 19 years old, and 2 psychiatrists, as expert witnesses, had said that she was mentally competent. And yet the court said, no, you're not mentally competent because you're disagreeing with us about what the treatment should be. She said, I want to die fighting. The doctors are saying, no, you should go into palliative care. And so they dismissed her wishes on the grounds that she was mentally incompetent, and then she wasn't able to get the treatment that she wanted to get. Now, we've won an important, significant step forward in this, haven't we, this week, Andrea, because they've won the right to appeal. The family have won the right to appeal the decision that she was mentally incompetent, which I think is a very important decision. Tell us about that, Andrea.
Absolutely, it's a very important step forward, again, because we can really test mental capacity in these cases, and that will have an impact then in terms of best interests. Sudiksha was such a brave warrior. 19 years of age, she was a bright light. She'd been a bright light all her life. It was quite, when you see if you get to know the family and see all this beautiful footage of their family and the love that they had with her brother Varshan and the parents, Tiru and Revati, they're so, so beautiful. But she was very bright. She did her GCSEs. She had mitochondrial disease. She had been on a clinical trial for mitochondrial disease that had been going really well until COVID shut it down. Isn't that tragic? And then she ended up in hospital during COVID. Then an operation within the hospital where she caught COVID, caught an infection, ended up going wrong. She ended up with a tracheostomy. But through that whole period, she was saying, I want to live. I want to continue the experimental trial that I was on. I want to go to Canada to do this. And some doctors and the courts actually said this in a judgment. And I think this is where suddenly it becomes very clear. what we've been trying to say for many years around the baby cases becomes very clear when a 19-year-old beautiful warrior called Sudiksha says, I don't want to have morphine. My mind is clear. I want to go to Canada. This tracheostomy is hurting me. I'm prepared to risk death to have it changed. She could actually say some of these things. It wasn't that she was scared of dying. She just wanted to go somewhere where treatment wouldn't be withdrawn, where she would be resuscitated, where they would do every effort to keep her alive versus permitting her to die. And that was because she was a fighter, because she'd fought all her life. So this case, when the authorities said it's in the best interests of Sudiksha to die because of her mitochondrial disease, when she was saying, no, it's not. I want to live, and could actually say it herself, and don't morphine me up because I don't want to be not able to speak. I can manage my pain. I want to let you know that I'm here. That's powerful.
It is. It is. It really is. Michael, what's your view on the significance of this appeal? I gather the judge said there's a real prospect of an appeal succeeding and compelling reasons for these important issues being considered by the Court of Appeal. What's your view on the importance of this appeal in this case?
Yeah, her case is a little bit different to the majority of cases that certainly that myself and colleagues have been involved with in the past, because here we have somebody who was quite literally in their right mind. She didn't have any kind of psychiatric disorder, didn't have any kind of psychological disorder, but there was a finding of being mentally incompetent because she disagreed, it would appear, with the advice of the treating doctors, who said inevitably she would die. Well, in one sense, they were right. We're all going to die. But was she mentally incompetent for that? And she had two independent psychiatric assessments done of her. And they both independently concluded that she was of sound mind. And so there must be some type of impairment in those circumstances, you might think, but no, so here's two doctors who say that she's of sound mind. She wants to do this, but in fact, the NHS said that she wasn't going to be doing that. And therefore a judge said that she wasn't mentally competent to make the decision. I can't understand that. I just can't understand that. So it is a very concerning suggestion that anybody can be deemed to be mentally incompetent because you disagree with your treating doctors. And so therefore, I think that she has got a very good prospect of success. And, we very much hope and pray that she will win her appeal.
Yeah, very good. Now, we've got a comment here from Ruth on Facebook saying, I'm confused by Christian's approach, as Christian's death is not something to fear. I feel the approach should be supporting the families come to peace with the inevitable death of their loved one. This little baby's life could only have been prolonged for a short time as she went on to this leave. She would be kept on life support treatments, often even when providing basic care like turning or washing someone on life support when they're so ill, can destabilize, etc. So, Andrea, how would you respond to someone saying that kind of thing?
It's wonderful, isn't it, as Christians, that we have the amazing hope that of the whole of eternity, that eternity is to come, and that's our absolute and wonderful and most blessed hope. And as somebody who's had very serious cancer and had the cancer return and lives very much with a lot of respect for my doctors and respect for their treatment plans, you get very clear, you get, with the hope of heaven, and in this situation, you get to a point whereby you're asking those big questions. Will I continue treatment? At what point would I not go for further treatment? And I think these are real questions that can be properly asked. And as Christians, and in every individual situation, in these sorts of situations, we can ask those questions. And I think people will have different viewpoints on when to stop treatment and so on and so forth. The question on these cases is not about that at all, in one sense. We want people to know Jesus Christ and to be in all eternity with him. The question in these cases is about decisions being made to withdraw treatment, which will mean certain death, and to do that prematurely against the wishes of parents or against the wishes of the patient, when alternative treatment is a real and viable option. And in that situation, people should be free to have that choice. So there's a sense in which, when cancer returned to my womb, we were able to remove my womb and my ovaries and so on. And that was a choice that was made in order to take the cancer away. Now, the reality would be with breast cancer, which was my first cancer, it can come to your bones, it can come to your limbs. And at that point, it begins to take over my body, and barring a miracle of prayer, medical prognosis would be that I would die, and chemotherapy might prolong that treatment. Now, at that point, there's a decision to make, and some people would choose to go for chemotherapy and so on, and some people would choose not to do that, and with the hope of Christ. But those are choices, and there's a sense in which that's what's happening here. So, but people are in this situation are on life support, or they're being given life-sustaining treatment, and our hospital is saying we're going to withdraw that when there's an offer of continuing life-sustaining treatment elsewhere. And in the case of Sudiksha, for instance, where there was, and other cases where sometimes therapy is being offered that may give a person a longer life or even cure. There is a case where a young boy who'd been, parents took him and he was put on proton therapy, and he's alive today as a result of being taken out of the country and being on that treatment.
So yeah, I hope that's been helpful explanation to Ruth and to others as well who may be thinking the same kind of thing there. Listen, I think we're running out of time now, but that's been a really great discussion. Thank you so much for your insight and wisdom, Andrea and Michael. Very interesting cases, very important cases. Do continue to follow them on our website. We'll be following the appeal for Sudiksha very, very closely as it comes up as well. I do want to close by saying we have got a very exciting launch of a new book next week, Tuesday evening, 7 p.m, live on Facebook, YouTube. We will be launching the book Christians in the Firing Line 2, second volume of collections of stories about our cases, including interviews with our clients and great testimonies and stories to read there. Do join us on that next week, next Tuesday, and probably see you again next week as well. But thank you for joining us and thank you for watching. Do follow us and subscribe to us, and see you again soon. Thank you very much.